Let's move in to the NFC South. We have the Atlanta Falcons. You have them at 10-7. I have them at 9-8. We both have them winning the division and making the playoffs, obviously. Why do you have them 10-7? Why do you think that they are going to be a double-digit win team?
Okay. Well, how about I preface with this? Because, my Saints brothers and sisters out there, they're probably pretty hurt to hear that I would have the Falcons, winning the division. But let's be objective here, guys. The Saints, I've seen too many Saints fans that are on the same trend as a lot of other teams now, where we just want to be unrealistic to be unrealistic. I don't like that. Okay, let's be realistic for a second. The Falcons have two amazing trench groups. So let's just start there. Back to the right when you got two.
Do you think their defensive line is amazing?
How about this? I won't say that that's amazing. I'm not gonna say amazing. What I'll say is this: 4 productive starters. You're right. Let me rephrase. You have 4 productive starters on that unit, and I think so. You have 4 productive starters on your D line. You have 5 productive starters on your O line, and then we go to the skill positions. And yes, that's when things do get a little concerning on offense. You're like, okay, I truly. You don't know how to feel necessarily all the way about skill positions on offense. But I think I look at it from this perspective. I've never been out on Kyle Pitts. I've never even lost faith at all in Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is still ready to be fully unlocked. So I look at Kyle Pitts like you got an absolute weapon over here at tight end. Drake London, same concept. I think Drake London's still waiting to be fully unlocked. Yeah, outside of that, it's not the greatest situation ever, but you still have guys that are ready to come in and, show that they get, Ray McLeod is interesting in the slot, and then Darnell Mooney on the outside. It's interesting, but it's not like I wouldn't say it's terrible by any means. You still have interesting, and then, right, just everything we already know. Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, I think is going to make a humongous jump this year. We already talked about the D line, the DBs. It's not the greatest unit, but the upside of it is very high with AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates. And they added Justin Simmons. There's a lot of upside in this team. And I think the bottom line is just, as far as the NFC South goes, the Falcons are the best roster in the NFC South. And if you can't admit that, no matter what team you're a fan of, then you enjoy lying to yourself. Now, me, for one, I don't enjoy lying to myself, and be honest. As much as they're a rival, it doesn't matter. The Falcons, they're the best team in the division on paper this year, and they finally have put a roster together that is fully capable of making the playoffs. And Falcons fans would agree. If they don't get the job done this year, Hunter, even though it's a whole new staff and everything else, questions have got to be asked because this team is too good not to put together a playoff appearance in the NFC South.
So I agree with you. I think they'll win the NFC South, but in my opinion, I'm more confident about the Bucs. And now I have the Bucs with the worst record. Because like you said, I think the key word is, on paper, this team should win the NFC South. Kirk Cousins, 38, 39 years old, coming off an Achilles tear. We know Kyle Pitts was dealing with the knee injury. Bijan Robinson, I think, will probably have 2,000 scrimmage yards this year between air from the ground and the pass game. Because what you said about the offensive trenches, they are one of the best O-lines in football. Like I'll agree with you on that. Now, I will say with Rondale Moore going down and Ray McLeod being your wide receiver 3, that does concern me. And we haven't seen Darnell Mooney be the most productive wide receiver in a couple years now. Now, I do think that has to do with the offense that was being run in Chicago. I do think he still has some juice, but we don't know. I think wide receiver 2 is obviously a better position for him than wide receiver 1, especially with Drake London there. So I do like the Judon trade. I do think 3 was a little rich, personally, especially because he's coming, and this is a good point, that it was a torn bicep. It wasn't like a lower body thing. So it's like he's still going to have that explosiveness. But yeah, this is just one of those teams where, like you said, I know it's a new coaching staff, and I know, okay, this is really going to be what's going to be tough for the Falcons. If Kirk Cousins does not play well, you got the number 8 overall pick sitting on the bench. I do not envy Falcons fans right now. I'll tell you, it is going to be a brutal talking point this year if Kirk Cousins does not play well.
Well, and I want to just, because I know we're going to get to them soon, so I'm going to hold off most of the discussion. But I'm telling you, because this is fans are crazy, Hunter. Like if fans are already doing that with Spencer Rattler, and I'm gonna say, look, I want to believe in the future, and I want Spencer Rattler to end up being a good QB. But too many fans, Hunter, I'm sorry. They just what is going on up here, guys? Like you can't just because you want something to be the case, you can't just force a functioning starter out the building for somebody that has minimal NFL experience. Like, it just doesn't work like that. And it's like you see how quickly everyone is just ready always, Hunter, to let's just turn around, just throw the backup in, throw the belt. See what he's guys. There's a reason that they're the backup. Like these coaches are watching every day at practice. Like if your guy was putting that shit on every practice, he would be the starter. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I get it, but I think the point I'm trying to make here is like fans as the NFL populace, like we got to stop this whole like just throw. Everybody's living in this fantasy Tom Brady land that their backup is some untapped legend. It's like, guys, like, and yes, I get with Penix, there's a little bit of a contingency where you maybe earned that right to be a little bit more excited for him than a normal backup, right? But the bottom line that I'm trying to make is this coaching staff's watching these guys every week, and they're going to put in the guy that they have the most faith is going to bring home the win that week. And as a fan, you kind of just have to be able to accept that and say, I'm not at practice and I'm not seeing the positives and the negatives. And for me to be demanding depth chart changes off of a couple mistakes, it's just it comes off rather casual in the nicest way possible.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if the Falcons can do it. I mean, I feel like they have to win this division, and I feel like they almost have to win a playoff game. I feel like if they lose a playoff game, it's kind of a disappointment of a season. Because
Falcons fans would agree.
I think the biggest thing is we know this team shouldn't have been 7-10 the last 3 years. Like, we know it. We know it.
That man, Art Smith, he was cooking for everybody else in the NFC South.
Yeah, I don't know. Such a frustrating team to watch. Let's go to the next team. We have the Carolina Panthers. You have them at 5-12. I have them at 3-14. I do think that the Panthers got better this offseason. I do. I think bringing in A'Shaun Robinson, bringing in Damian Lewis, bringing in Robert Hunt, they really invested in the interiors of the lines. Jadeveon Clowney, I don't know why I was slurring over that. I do think is a good addition, but he's gotten better, which is weird. He's actually gotten a lot more polished and better with age. I do still have concerns about the wide receiver room and their tackle situation. Like, we need to see Ike Ekwonu really step up to what he was his rookie year. Like, because if he doesn't, then you start saying, okay, we have a left tackle problem. And Bryce Young is not the biggest guy in the world, and like if you have a massive edge coming in hitting him multiple times throughout the season, I don't know how long he can stay healthy. You really need Jonathan Brooks to come back like what he's supposed to be. They invested a lot in the offense by going and getting Jatavion Sanders as well and Xavier Legette. Like they really tried to build around Bryce Young. I think I like the idea of going and getting Deontay Johnson. I like Adam Thielen. And in theory, I do like this receiving group for what it is. Like, for how little it's been invested. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do like the offensive skill group for what was invested in it, right? Let's just say that. I don't know if this group is necessarily going to take Bryce Young over the edge, though. I think that's going to be a lot on Dave Canales to prove that he can raise the ceiling of this team.
Well, 100%. And I think, look, I had them making a slight improvement, but I think Panthers fans would agree too. Look, they're probably a little bit more optimistic than us, hoping for, let's say, a number like 7 or 8 wins. And let's be clear. If they were to ceiling out and have a miraculous season, I do believe that it's possible for them to hit that kind of number. I do. I mean, if this defense can play super complementary, super tight, and this offense can just minimize the turnovers, and the O-line can just do anything compared to what it did last year. Look, this team they really do have some pieces, right? And especially when you would agree with this, when you take a look at their roster and their starters more than anything, let's disregard depth for a sec. When you look at the starters across the board, compared to even some other teams that we have much better than them, you're saying to yourself, like, they have like pieces across the board where
Right,
I
right.
understand what they're trying to do, and I agree with the direction of that. We say that a lot about the Panthers. Like it's about I 100% like agree with the vision. It's just the bottom line has been the whole offseason. The direction's right, but it doesn't mean that you're going to arrive at the destination at the end of this year. Like
This
the end
is
of the destination is probably multiple seasons down the road,
yeah.
if that, but you're at least headed in that direction.
This to me is effectively year one of the rebuild. Like you could consider, I think last year was year zero because you were playing with like zero assets. So with that being said, I mean, I think this team is far away. The biggest thing is Bryce Young needs to show that he can be your franchise quarterback.
No, Bryce Young needs to show you can be the franchise quarterback. I think, and you know, to add even just a couple other things onto that, I think, you know, one thing that would be a huge jump for the Panthers this year, you say, can JC Horn, can you
Stay
please
healthy.
just stay healthy for us this year? Like, because what I wanted to add in, you know, to kind of top off the Panthers in this case is if JC Horn has another one of those years, which has basically been every year, where when he's out there, he's quite literally one of the best corners in football, but when he's not for most of the season, this cornerback room, I don't want to say it's desolate, but it's about as close to being desolate as you could be in the most respectful way possible.
How
So,
many? Give me a percentage on how many games you think he's played out of all in his career, out of the total season.
okay, do you have the number in front of you?
I know what the percentage is.
Okay,
So
I'm
they're
going to guess that he has played 17%.
okay. It's a little higher. It's 43, but it's
See, I
it's
would have thought it
still
was, I
bad.
really would have thought it was less. I really would have thought it was like 20. Like,
It's just like when he was your first round pick in 2021. He's going into year 4. Like this is extension year, so like you really got to decide what you're gonna do with him. But overall, I mean, I think we came to the same sentiment, Dobbs, and we have for a while. Is that the Panthers just need to understand that this is really year one because it could have been last year if they didn't, you know, I hate to say it, but like didn't hire Frank. I don't hate to say it. Didn't have Frank Reich as their head coach. You know what I'm saying? Like it could have been year one if they would have just not hired Frank Reich. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Panthers fans for right now, I think Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are a much better combo than Scott Fitterer and Frank Reich.
yeah, I don't, there's no debate about that, at least currently. I don't think that
So
they'd
me,
have to
they'd have
really
to,
go
yeah,
downward spiral.
they'd have to slip a couple 100,000 for me to say that. Let's move into the New Orleans Saints. You have them at 9-8. I have them at 7-10. So I guess my thing, Dobbs, when I look at the Saints, I'm not like one of these Derek Carr haters. I think he went through for like what 4,000 yards last year. Like he's not bad, right? And you have Alvin Kamara. You have a all right receiving room with a star like Chris Olave. But when you get to that O line, it is bad. It is bad. And another thing that I want to talk about is outside of Olave, all your stars are aging. And the cap situation isn't great. So it's just like I think the floor is relatively high for this team, but I don't see unless the offense like really gets in a groove early, which is a new OC, so I don't know if that's going to be the case, how they win 10 games. Like I don't see how they touch double-digit wins unless they start out like that.
No, well, again, look, as a Saints fan, I'm going to tell you straight up, you're spot on. And any Saints fan that's not lying to themselves is going to tell you, look, we probably, this hurts. We probably have the worst O-line in football right now. And look, I look where it's due, credit where it's due. Talise Fuaga could end up being a fantastic pro, and he could end up having a great career for us, which I do believe he's going to do. And to add, I think Eric McCoy is a really, really good starter, and he's one of the best centers in all of football. But irregardless of the two things I just stated, Talise Fuaga is a rookie, and you can only expect so much from a rookie. On top of that, everywhere else, Lucas Patrick is our starting guard. Cesar Ruiz is our starting right guard. they both have had. I'm just gonna say it. They've had dismal starts to their career, right? I mean, like I'm just gonna keep, like, especially for the fact that Cesar Ruiz was a first round pick for us. Love his story. Think he's a good dude. But I'm gonna be honest for a second. Cesar Ruiz has not moved the needle in the slightest since we spent a draft pick on him. And then let's just move over to Trevor Penning, where it gets even worse. We spent an even earlier pick on Trevor Penning. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, no, we did. We spent an even earlier pick on first round pick on Trevor Penning, and it's actually gone somehow much worse than Cesar Ruiz, so much worse than Cesar Ruiz. Trevor Penning genuinely looks like the worst tackle in football on tape. And he's a starter.
Dobbs, I'm going to say something. Saints fans, if you don't want to hear this, cover your ears. Lucas Patrick is your starting left guard.
See, that's not, I know. And that's why I'm saying, like, to Saints fans that don't know, there's a lot of Saints fans right now that don't know who Lucas Patrick is.
You don't want him on the field.
They haven't been paying enough attention to how bad Cesar Ruiz has been playing. Like, there's a lot of Saints fans that I get it. I get it. They kind of have their head in the sand about the rest of the teams, and they're just about who that nation. I get it. Like, hey, Saints fans, I get it. But the bottom line is this: I'm telling you, Saints fans, as one of the most tapped in Saints fans. I live and breathe Saints fans. I do. You have to understand. I have seen this team at the pinnacle. Where I have been with my family watching this team hoist the Lombardi. And let me tell you, as I hope most of you Saints fans have as well, you guys have got to be realistic. This roster is so far from that roster where we know as Saints fans, at least we should, if we're not being delusional, what a good roster is. We know what a championship caliber roster looks like. We know what it looks like when we won. We know what it looks like when we got robbed of winning one. This roster is very far from that. And to your point, Hunter, let's just wrap it up with this. Bad O-line. You're spot on about the aging stars. We have stars, but they're old. And we always talk about Super Bowl windows. Well, if the Saints had a Super Bowl window, let's be real, Hunter, that bitch is being cracked open by a toothpick. And they would need to have the most miraculous season in history to go win the Super Bowl this year.
Honestly, I'm going to say this right now. It's like when you go to view an apartment or a house and the painter just painted over the window so you can't even open it. Like, if you really try to get under there, it might open, but you got to crack the paint. And that's how it feels with the Saints right now.
And you do. And that's the problem, Hunter, is too many Saints fans. I love it. I love that they want to be optimistic and hold on to the glory days that we just were recently through. But there hits a point where being positive when things are going negative is detriment to the future because you're essentially telling the organization, I'll keep throwing you money to keep making stupid decisions. Guys, come on. We have to, as Saints fans, say to ourselves, if this is another dismal season, there is not only does we, because to your point, I want to close out with this. A lot of Saints fans are like, Derek Carr this, Derek Carr that. Look, Derek Carr is not moving the needle for me. And do I think he's a great quarterback? No.
The Saints have bigger issues.
But to your point, if Derek Carr had a productive O-line around him with the roster that they currently have, with how bad the NFC South is, not necessarily bad, but how everybody's so ready to compete with each other, I think the Saints very well could win this division. But when you put an O-line like that around Derek Carr, it's a dismal combination. It's dismal. The only person that can save us this year, as Saints fans would I think agree that are not overly optimistic. Look, let's just be real. If Clint Kubiak has the most amazing offense and pulls, right, and has everybody just shocked and confused and we got Taysom Hill out here running QB 7 step. We got a bunch of crazy shit going on. Okay, you know what? Just maybe the Saints can get creative enough to pull out a playoff appearance. But if that's not the case, and obviously we know, yes, our defense is still going to be a good unit. I still have so much faith in this defense. I want to be crystal clear about that. I do have a lot of faith in this defense. But that's the bottom line. Is the Saints defense does not win most weeks. We're not going to win a lot of games necessarily. And it's the bottom line. And this is coming from the biggest fan of a team you could ever be. But I'm big enough of a fan that I'm also willing to be realistic. A lot of people claim to be big fans. They're going to sit here and bullshit you. I'm not going to sit here and bullshit you. The Saints have a lot of work to do, Who Dat Nation. And it starts with acknowledging it. I'm going to be the first to acknowledge it.
All right, let's move into our last team in the NFC South. We have the Buccaneers finishing at 8-9. I do think I am a little bit concerned going from Dave Canales, who kind of, I don't want to say resurrected Geno Smith's career, resurrected Baker's career. And now we have Tampa Bay with Liam Cohen. And I do think that their wide receiver room is fine. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan. They have Cade Otton as well. A little concerned about the guard situation. I think they found their center in Graham Barton. But overall, I mean, this team is really talented. They have a really high floor, but I don't know if they necessarily have the biggest ceiling in the world. So I could see them winning 10 games and making the playoffs. I could also see them regressing to 8 and 9 and missing the playoffs.
Well, that's exactly how I had it, and I think my biggest thing was just this. Look, you could really the Bucks is actually more of a simple recipe than anybody else. I think I'm going to tie it to look. We got a whole new OC situation where the OC situation was working wonders last year, and we know how a lot of people like to glaze over when there's a transition of course. Look, we use the Eagles as the most recent example. Like it doesn't matter how good a team was beforehand. When operations change, and sometimes the result is drastically different. And I think the big thing with the Bucks on top of the operation changing is, and Bucks fans would agree with this, how confident were we, Hunter, in the operation from the Todd Bowles perspective? I mean, how confident are we and Bucks fans in Todd Bowles being the long-term head coach?
Right.
I think you start to consider all these things, and then you say, okay, look, the biggest thing. The success of this team, and far and away, it doesn't come down to their center more than any other team besides the Buccaneers. Because you just drafted Graham Barton to essentially be your plug and to replace who was a legend for you for so long. But the problem with that is now in Jensen. But the problem with that is that if he doesn't have a good season, right? If Barton comes out and has a stinker, kind of like how John Michael Schmidt did last year for the Giants, to kind of make a little comparison, you're stuck in a situation where you spent an early round pick on a lineman who, again, linemen sometimes can go from having terrible starts to their career to being really good. It's not like you would even be indicative that it's going to have a terrible career. But I'm just saying for this season specifically, if Barton doesn't have a good year, and yeah, you could, if you're a Bucs fan, you're saying to me, well, Brederson and Cody Mauch, they could have big jumps this year. But from a likeliness perspective, how bad that the tape was last year, and making a big enough jump this year that they are like game changers is going to be really hard to do. So I look at it from the perspective of like, you essentially right now have 3 defective positions on the O-line until Graham Barton can prove to me he's going to be a productive starter. So it's like, and yes, the tackle situation is actually really good, but having 2 tackles doesn't mitigate having 3 weaker interior positions. So it's like, I think losing the OC on top of the volatile O-line situation, on top of the volatile head coach situation, on top of, I think we could say this about the Bucs, very similar to the Saints. One thing that we could definitely say that they share in common is that their superstars are all getting old. So it's like,
I do feel a little bit more confident in the Bucs young defensive line, though.
I would agree with that. I definitely would. I would say like Yaya Diaby can make a big jump this year. We know Vita Vea. We know Kalijah Kancey is prone to making that jump, even though he was like the definition of volatile last year. So I agree with you 100% about that. It's kind of just the Bucs and the Saints.
Even their cornerback room was Zion McCollum being their number 2.
Well, exactly. That's the thing is, yes. And he could make a big jump, right? And when we talked to Mr. Bucks, he was saying, that was his guy. But the bottom line to me, more than anything else, is like, look, this team could end up being the team that makes the playoffs at NFC South. I lean, though, towards a slight regression and perhaps even you could say almost like the direction of a regime change kind of starting.
Right. No, I feel you. It's definitely the Bucs strike me as a team that they're banking on getting hot at the right time because they're not going to be bad enough to draft high, but they're also not top tier to win like the 1 seed,
No, absolutely. I think that's really the best evaluation for the Bucs. They're kind of like in the competing for this year, and outside of that, we're going to have to just figure it out going forward. They're kind of they're like wheeling and dealing.